Hello and welcome to the next part of the Cripple to Taralga Road to Taralga ride. In the last video we passed through Laggan and now we're on the road to Taralga, and in this video we'll get past Taralga and be on the road towards Goulburn. So there'll still be a couple of clips after that before we make it to Goulburn, before I make it to Goulburn, but I will get to the village of Taralga in this video. So as you can see, the road around the moment seems to be in pretty good condition. It's well marked, with lines on both sides and markings down the middle, and there's that sense of spaciousness that I might have referred to in previous videos, because the tree line is back from the road a bit, so it looks to be quite open and gives you that sense of spaciousness. There are other places where the tree line is a bit closer to the edge of the road, but I think overall this road is in pretty good condition and I've quite enjoyed riding on it. It's not a road that sees a lot of traffic, but nevertheless it is well maintained. What I thought I'd do in this video is I would get back to talking about motorcycling, and I guess some of my audience now will be saying, thank goodness for that, we're a bit sick of hearing about politics and all that sort of stuff, and I understand that. So as I said, I think I'll talk a bit about motorcycling, and I thought I would start off by talking about the bikes that I own, which I have done in a very early video. In fact, the very first video I made, I talked a bit about the bikes I own, and you may not have seen that one, so if you're a newcomer to my channel, or you're just watching this one as a one-off, then you may not know too much about the bikes I ride. You would have seen in the beginning of this video, at the end of the last clip, the bike that I'm riding when I've made these clips, and that is my Kawasaki Vulcan Voyager. It's a 2010 model which I bought in 2011, and so it's now getting on for about 10 years old, and it's got about 97,000 kilometres on it. It's a 1700 V-twin, and it is a belt drive. Now, I've had bikes that are shaft drives, I've had bikes that are chain drives, and I've had clearly this bike and the other bike I own, which I'll talk about later, that are belt drives. And I would say, in my opinion, the shaft drive is the best, simply because there's never any maintenance with it. You never have to worry about belts or chains wearing out or whatever. It doesn't need oiling, doesn't need adjusting. I acknowledge that it's probably a little bit slower on the uptake sometimes, and the chain system may give you a bit faster takeoff, but overall that doesn't generally worry me very much anyway. And I would say that the next best system is the belt drive, and I'd say that because, as I said, this bike's got about 97,000 kilometres on it, and it's still got the original belt, so anyone who's worried about how long the belts last and how do they work and so on, this one's lasted close to 100,000 Ks. I know with chains you've got to keep oiling them and keep servicing them and adjusting them, and they sometimes need replacing and so on. So I would rate that as the least, possibly the worst is the best way to put it, of the three systems of getting power from the engine to the back wheel. The 1700 Voyager, as I said, is a V-twin. It has a 6-speed transmission with a heel and toe shifter. The 6th gear is an overdrive gear that you're meant to engage when you're on the highway and you're getting up to your top speed of 110 or whatever it is that you comfortably drive at. You can use it at lower speeds, of course, and we know that the sooner you get into top gear on your bike, the better is going to be your fuel economy. And I use it sometimes when I'm driving around town 50, 60 kilometres an hour, but it's obviously much better suited for the highway. It has the heel and toe shifter, as I mentioned, and to me that is one of the things that is a mark of a cruiser. I know that in recent years Harley Davidson, for example, have gone to the toe shifter, and that probably saves a few bucks on each shifter that they have to make, but it detracts from the look. And in my opinion, sometimes when you're wearing really thick, heavy boots, you're trying to get your toe underneath the lever to lift it up to change from first through neutral to second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on, can be a bit of a squeeze. And I know also that will wear out your boot eventually. Now, I know you can buy boots with an extra flapper to reinforce them over that area, but just to me, simply putting your heel on the back of the heel and toe shifter when you want to change up, your toe on the toe shifter to change down, is much easier. The Kawasaki Voyager has twin discs at the front and a single disc at the back. It has ABS. It has also a system called Kayak Braking, and how that works is that when you engage the front brake, all three discs are engaged with balanced amounts of force and pressure. When you use the foot brake, you engage the right front disc and the rear disc, so you don't get as much stopping power. Nevertheless, the stopping power is pretty good, but the idea is to use obviously the combination of the front and rear brakes, and then you'll feel the full benefit of the ABS system. The Voyager also has cruise control, and it works like cruise control in your car. It's an electronic device, and you engage it by flicking a switch and setting the speed you want. If you activate the clutch or either of the brakes, the cruise control will disengage, and then you can reset it in the same way as you would for your car. To me, the benefit of cruise control is that when I'm out on the highway and I'm going to ride a long ride, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours or whatever it is, if I can put on the cruise control, it means that I can get my hand off the throttle every now and again, and everyone who rides knows about that right hand grip of death thing, and the often ache you get in your shoulder blades, just below your shoulder blades, and in your right wrist and upper arm and so on, that sometimes comes from gripping the throttle too tightly. So if you can get your hand off the throttle for a little while, or at least relax your grip, because the throttle's going to stay, the cruise control is going to keep the bike operating at the speed you want it to do, then that's a good thing. I think you can't engage it in anything below fourth gear, and below 40 kilometres an hour you can't engage it either. It doesn't make any sense if you're in third gear and you're driving around town to be putting the cruise control on anyway. But I find it very effective for highway driving. The tank of the bike is 20 litres. It takes octane 95. I've never put anything less. I think I might have put 94 in it once or twice, but I've never put E10 or anything 91 or anything like that in it before. When I first bought it, there's a warning on the tank that says if you do so, it could void the warranty. Obviously, the warranty is well and truly passed after 10 years, but nevertheless, you want your bike to perform well, and if it advises you not to put lower than 95 octane in, it's probably a good idea to follow that advice and not do that. It makes your bike makes you fill up a little bit more expensive, but I find the 95 and 98 octane goes a bit further anyway. And as an example, I remember one very memorable trip that I took where I managed to squeeze 350 kilometres out of a tank of fuel. And when I got back to Goulburn that day, I had about half a litre left. So I wouldn't recommend you do that as a regular thing. Probably 200 and 250 kilometres is about the maximum. And I should say that when I got that 350, I was using cruise control and I was down to 80 kilometres an hour, because I was about 50 kilometres from home, maybe 40 kilometres from home, something like that, when the fuel light started flashing. And that generally means you've got about a litre or something of fuel left. So I cut my speed down a bit lower and to make sure I would limp home. But about 200 kilometres, 250 kilometres is probably enough to be riding before you need to stop and fill up anyway. Just think of how long you're going to be sitting in the saddle riding for 2 hours or more to cover that distance, so it's probably a good time to stop and fill up then anyway. Speaking of the saddle or the seat, it's a very wide, broad, comfortable seat. This is a bike that's made for 2-up. It's modelled on a Harley Davidson. I don't remember which one, but it's one that's got an alphabet of letters after its name, like most Harleys do. And Kawasaki decided at one stage they were going to make a direct challenge to Harley, and so they modelled this bike almost exactly on the Harley, only sold it for about half the price. I think when I bought this one, the right-away price was about 23k. I got a nice trade-in on the bike I'd previously owned, so I didn't pay that price for it. But the equivalent Harley is 40k or more, so they've certainly done the job on price. And I know the Harley riders will always deride anything they refer to as Jap crap, but that's another story. The seats is very comfortable. The passenger seat is very comfortable. There's a really good backrest which is attached to the hard case at the top case. It opens to the left when you're facing the bike, so the lid lifts up and swings back to the left, and it can fit one full face helmet, but there are two hard cases on the side. You can't fit helmets in either of those, they open at the top. But if you're not fussy about how much you've got to take with you on a weekend away, you'd probably take enough clothing and so on for two people on a weekend away and fit it all in the top cases and the side cases. So overall, it has an audio system that plays AM and FM music. It also has, I think, satellite radio in the States, but of course we don't have that in Australia. But you can also plug in your music player through a headphone jack and play music off your music player or your phone or whatever it is through the bike's audio system. Or you can, as I do now, use one of those FM transmitters and Bluetooth your music player or Bluetooth your phone that has music on it through the bike's audio system and play it that way. It's a very comfortable bike and I thoroughly enjoy riding it. The second bike I have is a Suzuki Birdman scooter. Now that bike is kept in Tasmania and I haven't been able to go to Tasmania all of this year. I'm hoping to be able to get back there early next year. I haven't made any videos with that bike because when I was down there I didn't have the cameras and equipment that I do have now, but I'm hoping to make videos when I'm down there next time with using that bike and the camera and my cameras. It's a bit difficult to compare those two machines because obviously one is a bike and one is a scooter, but I would say first of all to anyone who has the anti-scooter prejudice, just get over that and look at what it is, how you want to ride, where you want to ride, what, where you're going and all that sort of stuff, and then decide on what's the best thing for you. I find that the Birdman is good for the city and good for the open road, but obviously the Kawasaki, being nearly 400 k's fully laden and wet as they say, is not the bike you buy for the daily commute around the city. It's just because it's too heavy and it's hard to manoeuvre. It's much better out on the open road, whereas the Birdman, which is only 220 kilos, and still that's a sizable weight, is much easier to manoeuvre around the city. Having said that, you wouldn't buy one with the idea that I'm going to buy a Suzuki Birdman 650 and use it to deliver pizza, simply because I think they're about 14,000 something when they were available in Australia, and as far as I know they're no longer available in Australia, but when they were available they were about $14,500 right away. And you're not going to buy a bike of that size and use it to deliver pizza because it's too expensive to buy the bike, and it's also expensive in terms of the cost you have to spend every year to keep your bike on the road. Third-party insurance, comprehensive insurance, registration and all those sorts of things. The reason people drive those little scooters and 50s and 125s and 110s and so on for delivering pieces is because the bikes themselves are cheap, and $3 or $4 grand to buy one, and they cost next to nothing to run, and they cost next to nothing to put on the road. You would buy the Suzuki Birdman if you were planning to do some open road touring on the weekends as well, and it's very well set up for that. It can hold its own at 110 on the freeway. It's very comfortable to ride. It has 2 discs up front and a single disc at the back. It has a CVT transmission. We've got CVT, so constantly variable transmission, almost like an automatic. With no clutch. The levers on the handlebars are for the front and rear brakes only. But it also has a manual override so that you can manually select the gears, and that's helpful because when you're on the highway it allows you to select the 6th gear, which gives you the effect of an overdrive and therefore gives you better fuel economy. The Birdman's got about a 14-litre tank, which I find gives you about 200 kilometres of riding. It seems to rev much higher, the engine seems to rev at a much higher rate than the Kawasaki. The Kawasaki is happy to rev at about 2,500 rev all the time when you're in a highway riding at 100, whereas the Birdman is looking at 4,000 or 5,000 revs. Some of that fuel consumption maybe the way I ride it, I don't know, but it didn't seem to be, well, it seems to give you about 200 kilometres of riding before you need to fill up, and that's about 2 hours of riding anyway. The seat's fairly comfortable, only it's a little bit harder than the seat on the Kawasaki. The one thing I would say, if I was going to ride my Birdman a lot on the open road, and when I'm in Tasmania, I do take it on long open road rides as well as ride around the suburbs and ride it to places where I'm going to go running and so on, is that it would benefit from a cruise control system like the Kawasaki or a throttle lock. I bought a cheap thing on eBay as a throttle lock and it turned out to be useless. But the reason I say that is it's hard to, if you're going to ride 200 k's or something, and I did ride once from Launceston, which is in the north of Tasmania, down to Richmond, which is in the southwest, and I think that was close to 200 kilometre ride. If you're going to ride that distance, you are going to get that pain in your bicep and in your lower wrist and also just below your shoulder blade from holding the throttle open all the time. And if you can lock the throttle open for a while and you get your hand off the throttle for a while, it's going to alleviate that pain. Those throttle locks, as I understand, the ones that work really well you can either manually disengage them, or if you engage the front, either one of the brake levers, it will disengage, and then you have to reactivate or re-engage it, and you're ready to go back to speed. So it's a bit hard to compare those two because, one's a scooter, one's a bike, one's the engine is 2.5 times the other one. I thoroughly enjoy riding both of them, but they're, as I said, clearly the Birdman is more suited to the highway, more suited to the city than the Kawasaki's. The Birdman has an electrically adjustable screen which you can adjust while you're riding, and the benefit of that is that when you're riding into a town and you need to slow down, you might want to drop the screen down to give more airflow. But when you're riding out of the town at highway speeds, again, you want to keep the wind off your face and chest and put the screen back up again. This video is about to come to an end, so I hope I've covered most of the points that you would be interested in comparing the two. On this channel you'll also find a review of the Kawasaki, a very short one, and you'll also find a review of the Birdman. So thank you for watching, and I will talk to you again when I'm preparing the next clip.